Thank you very much for joining us today in our session on the unexpected learnings from building a data-driven culture. I'm Zara Wells and I'm the Head of Data Culture and Transformation Programs for Looker within Google Cloud. And I'm going to pass straight over to my panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Laura.
Lovely. So happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Laura Gilbert, Senior Director of Analytics at Chime, where I built the analytics team from 3 to over 50 in just 2 years. What is Chime? Chime provides a financial peace of mind to millions of Americans with access to fee-free banking products like a fee-free checking account, fee-free savings account, fee overdraft protection, even a free credit card that improves your credit as you use the card. Happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Courtney Letting, and I'm an advanced analyst at Electronic Arts. My team supports an area of the business that really focuses on the PC gaming platform and the subscription service.
Hi, my name is Ranji, and I am under the data platform engineering team here at Wayfair. Specifically, I am a senior product manager under the data access and visualization team, and we basically own the success of every single data tool used here at Wayfair.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to be with you all today. We wanted to encourage a slightly different conversation. We wanted to talk specifically about those things that go wrong. How could they have been mitigated? You know, with the wonderful view of hindsight, what should we have done differently? To kick us off, Ranji, could you talk a little bit more about some of those unexpected challenges, you know, what maybe wasn't considered and the tweaks that you had to make to overcome them?
Yeah, so I guess it isn't really something that went wrong, but in hindsight, there are definitely things that we can plan more for, right? So here at Wayfair, we have a lot of different business areas using data. And one of the things with rolling out something like Looker to a enterprise solution is that you're going to have different challenges in data culture specifically within all of those different areas. Having just one solution might get you about half or three-quarters away there if you're very lucky, but ultimately you do need to think about the different data areas, the different data maturities for those business areas and how to potentially address those. So one of the things that we learned kind of later on too is while it makes sense to have a overall enterprise-wide strategy in terms of data culture, how are we onboarding? How are we ensuring people are using Looker? How are we ensuring that they're getting the most out of Looker even? It does make a lot of sense to work with those specific business areas to get more understanding of what are your challenges? What are the specific historical tools and usages that you have that we need to now bring into Looker or find different solutions for? And how do we kind of take lessons learned from each of those areas to potentially apply and better some of our other areas that might not be at that level of data maturity or might want to grow more, right?
You know, rather than that one size fits all, you're getting into the microclimates that already exist in those different pockets, understanding where they're at today and, you know, working with that rather than just throwing things at them and hoping it sticks.
One thing that we found after rolling out all of our dashboards that we had created was that we were still getting a lot of requests. So we have a Slack channel where you have basically access to all of our analysts, and we were getting a lot of requests that could have easily been answered if people were going to the dashboards or if they really understood how to use Looker, because we did create it to be kind of more of a self-serve tool. So we did find that collecting all of these types of questions, we could actually work on refining our dashboards, and also, you know, every single business kind of has different needs, and tailoring that to the needs, and also iterating. So when the business changes and shifts, we do need to iterate and update things and what needs to be focused on. So that was really what we found was a challenge. I think also, yeah, really trying to encourage the education piece. We didn't do a really good job of that at the very beginning. So that's one area that we need to improve on.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Laura, when we were chatting previously, you also mentioned something around the training piece. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
The surprise was how important training was in getting adoption. We had, when you don't see the adoption that you're hoping for, you try a lot of different things. You make the best dashboards possible. You really make Looker clean, and you do all the things that you want to with Looker. And it was really when we settled on a lot of training that we created the adoption that we were always hoping for. We had a little bit of a mentality that if you build it, they will come. And it's actually a little bit more of a tweak to that. If you build it, they might not come. You really have to train your team, the broader team. And it's not just training them at onboarding, it's also training them and giving them materials on an ongoing basis to create that adoption.
What were the sort of behaviors or attitudes, things like that were manifesting that allowed you to see that things weren't going quite the way that you wanted them to?
Well, here's one of the wonderful things about Looker is you can actually build dashboards that tell you how many people are using Looker. So we could build something that allowed us to quantify Looker adoption in Looker itself, which is one of the wonderful things about Looker. So that was one cue that we had to understand we had room to improve and we had a challenge on our hands. The second is we have a larger analytics team. The analytics team that I lead is both product analytics, marketing analytics, but also BI. And what we were seeing is a lot of the folks that we had hired to do more advanced analytics, data science, experimentation, they were getting pinged fairly frequently with some of the smaller data requests that we understood could be self-serve, but we understood they weren't being self-serve. So I would say those are the two key indicators, both using Looker to tell us exactly what adoption we had in place and seeing that we had room to improve, and then also getting some of those what we would like to be self-serve requests in the analytics team itself.
Yeah, so similar to what Laura was seeing in terms of the analysts were getting like the smaller types of requests. Our team would, instead of spending the time on deep dives and, the more exciting types of projects, again, we were getting the requests because the self-serve tool, like I said before, wasn't being used or it wasn't actually satisfying the needs. So we didn't have the metrics in there that the business was actually really interested in because the business objectives have changed. So it was really coming back to, speaking to each team, understanding their needs, and tailoring Looker and the dashboards and all of that to that. So we could then spend time elsewhere instead of building dashboards and answering the smaller types of requests that could be easily answered through self-serve.
So Ranji, you mentioned about the different areas of Wayfair and also about the infrastructure and how that was different and previous tools. How did you navigate some of those harder conversations, potentially not wanting to change anything?
Yeah, so it goes back into a lot of that data maturity that I previously mentioned as well, right? So different areas are going to have different data maturity, and because of their different data maturity, Looker might be slightly more advanced for them, or Looker might not necessarily be at the right level of use for them based on how we built it. So it is a lot of working with those individual data engineering teams as well as their stakeholders, getting that understanding of what really is the business need. Where are we at our data maturity? Are we at a point where we can start leveraging some of the Looker explorations, or do we need people to start them off with some dashboards and insights and some guidance on how do we actually use this data to influence our businesses. Having that understanding, and then going back to what Laura was talking about earlier with onboarding and training, having that understanding and then using that with your training and onboarding, setting those expectations of, for your area of the business, this is how you should start looking at data. This is your potential path for growing your data maturity, really helps some of those areas better understand what is available with Looker, what we built in Looker, as well as helping them better understand this is data. How do we use data? How do we start thinking more about data culture and where it's going to grow, right?
In your experiences, did you find that actually taking more time in the planning phase reduced some of those risks or additional time that you had to spend fixing things?
What we strategically do is go to each department and do that upfront cost of have big conversations about how do you measure your business and cull down all the maybe 100 metrics that you could track into a handful, like 3 per department of key performance indicators. And then you set goals for each of those key performance indicators. And then you have this wonderful gift of creating dashboards that are simple, that you can compare the current KPI with the goal for that KPI. You can color it red, yellow, green, and it's a beautiful simplified picture that you send to various constituents at your company that's very clean, very summarized, and everyone's on the same page that that's how I want to measure my business. It's not too busy, and I have my fingerprints on what I'm seeing every day. So they're hungry for it every day. As a matter of fact, one of the things we do is we commonly Slack out these KPIs to each business on a daily basis, weekly basis, because they're so hungry to see it. They want to start their day knowing how their business is doing.
Yeah, so to add on to what Laura was saying as well, establishing those KPIs, ensuring the business is in agreement with them, and also sharing that with the business on a regular basis. Those are all structures and processes that we can set as well. So even if different business areas need potentially slightly different solutions more tailored to them, having those processes and structures there still gives the business a direction to go in, and it gives people a way to leverage other lessons learned from other areas as they are also building their data culture and going on their data journey, right?
Yeah, and I also just want to add as well, like Laura and Ranji, we talk to our stakeholders and set those KPIs ahead of time. One of the issues that I said that we had was that the business objectives had changed. So we had gone through the alignment with all of the stakeholders for the KPIs and started building dashboards off of that. But then some things had shifted, and so we had to kind of revisit that and go through that process again. So it might happen where your dashboards aren't being used because the KPIs aren't relevant anymore. And in that case, then you have to revisit that.
It's actually not uncommon. I've heard a number of organizations kind of, particularly with COVID, everything effectively gets thrown out the door. And it's also not recognized, I feel, how much work you all are doing to, navigate all of the data that is being collected anyway, all of those processes, skipping over a lot here, but to get it into a format that, end users are able to translate.
I have always classically thought about metrics and KPIs as a tree, like a hierarchical tree. As a really great analyst, you have to deeply understand the business and understand how all of them intertwine with each other so that you can, when you're talking to the executives, just go to the top 3 KPI. And underneath this one KPI of the 3, there's another 3 underneath it, like for growth, it might be marketing and engagement and retention. And then you go to marketing and there's another 3 underneath that. And I think because there is so much data, you have to focus on clearing the cobwebs for your company and organizing it and simplifying the message for your company.
It's that governance piece that I think can be incredibly daunting. And part of that, I think I'm hearing across what all of you are saying, is one of those challenges that wasn't necessarily unexpected, but it was a challenge and you've had to navigate that. In terms of the tactical things that you've had to do to mitigate those challenges, can we talk more about those?
We have very limited resources to influence a lot of business paths. So what we did was we put our process and structure into a documentation and kind of surfaced it to our different data engineering teams and BI teams, and kind of defined what the roles are, what the expectations are for each of those. What are the individual steps that they might need to go through, right? Like including data movement, how to structure that in Looker from there on out. How should you start building or thinking about building explorers for your analysts? How should your analysts start with this usage, et cetera, including training, onboarding. And then from there on out, when you hand it over, kind of having that expectation of, we expect you to follow this. We expect you to bring us back lessons learned so we can continuously improve on this project. Because ultimately, building a data culture is not, we stop here, it's done. It's a continuously improvement kind of thing, right? So you add those lessons learned and then you continuously improve with each new area that you add. You add processes for, if my business area has new data that they're looking at, maybe Looker surface something for them that they're like, oh, this is interesting. If only I can see these additional things. How do they add that? Having those structures there and having people follow that structure really helps just keep the movement and keep things flowing more, right? And from our side, what we found is that we have made exceptions for teams who just wanted to move fast and didn't want to follow these processes. But the overall success for those teams are most of the time not nearly as up there as our teams that do follow the processes. Because ultimately, if you want to move fast and don't follow processes, there are going to be areas that you miss. There are going to be things that other teams have considered, had lessons learned and best practice established that you're not necessarily taking on, right?
We have a Looker Champions group where everyone who's in there is working together to establish these best practices. And like you built out a playbook, we have a resource center, our Google sites, where you can go if you're looking for, from basic to advanced. And you can actually learn how to use Looker in terms of how we at EA are using Looker, and learn from our mistakes, basically.
Not everyone will follow those processes, but equally, what you've spoken about there is exactly what cultural change is. You have a group of people that are kind of evolving with you as cultures do. Like you said, there's never an end state. It's a continual journey. Cultures change, organizational cultures change. But equally, it's not the whole carrot and stick thing, but you are able to show people, fine, we can do it your way, we'll do it quickly, but you won't be as advanced as, the other teams that are coming on this journey with us in the way that we've, paved it out. And I think that's really important.
And I feel like that's where documentation also helps, right? When you have these documentations of, hey, by the way, this is how we expect things to look. You're slightly changing things up a bit. But did you look at the documentation? Did you make those decisions and weigh the values, pros and cons to make those decisions? And ultimately, if they still made the decision to go a different direction, at least they had the right resources to make those kind of value judgment and considerations, right?
Leverage some of those comments. I think what we're talking about is one of the initial challenges that I mentioned much earlier, which was it's about training, but it's not just about training at onboarding. It's about training on an ongoing basis. And Ranji, what you're highlighting is a lot of that training doesn't need to be what you think of as a training. It doesn't need to be a person in front of a Zoom talking. That training can be materials, documentation. It can be in Confluence, how to access Looker, how to format your axes like this in Looker, how to format your charts like this in Looker, how to have navigation bars like this in Looker. And so two things that we've done in our team is we've tried to leverage lots of different venues to provide that non-classic ongoing training. Confluence is a big hit for us. We also use Looker itself. There's a lot that we put in Looker that are tips and tricks. You can look up starter packs or Looker style guide in Looker itself. And if you go to starter packs, you will see we do have a lot of transactions because we have checkings and savings accounts. If you want to look at transactions, it's a big table, it's complicated. Just go to the starter pack in Looker and it will tell you queries to do common things that you might want to do. The Looker style guide has in Looker things like fancy navigation bars, fancy formatting or icons that you can add to your chart. And because it's already in Looker, you can just copy and paste it into whatever dashboard that you're building. So I think that what we're all saying is getting back to this challenge of how do we change with the organization and how do we identify things that are coming up in certain parts of the organization that are really great and how do we leverage them in other places. Confluence or documentation or building things into Looker is one fantastic way to do that. And I'll mention the second way to do that is to create communities. We have a Looker Ask channel in Slack, and I'm consistently delighted how folks will go in there. And even though we have a BI team in my team, so frequently someone will come in from just the broader business and have a question. How do I format this way? Or what table do I use for this? And someone not on our team will answer that question. It's a wonderful way to create a community of Looker adopters. So we encourage that as well.
Yeah, we also have something similar at Wayfair. We do also use Slack. So we have a Slack channel for Looker specifically where people can ask questions. In our beginning days, we actually also established, based on Looker's recommendation, actually what we call a hub council. So we use the hub and spoke methodology, right? So with a hub council, we have these lead developers and power users where we can start making some of these strategic decisions on Looker, establish best practices, and bring them back to each other, right? It's a community, as Laura was mentioning. We can talk about the different things that made sense or worked well for us, and then learn from each other ultimately.
Yeah, we also, like I said earlier, we have our Looker champions, which is exactly the same idea, where we're establishing those best practices. But we also have that Looker internal channel where anyone can ask questions about how to use Looker. And then even further, sometimes we'll have internal within organizations like Looker Slack channels, so you can really dive into specific questions about your model, for example.
And the benefit for Looker too is it is part of GCP now. And with that, it has a large community. So having conversations with people outside of your org too, like Laura and Courtney, very exciting to meet both of you and have discussions like this, right? And also I know our Looker account partners have also brought us into conversations with other Looker users and orgs to discuss some of the challenges we're facing to potentially leverage some of their lessons learned as well.
And Ranji, you're right, that community of Looker users extends beyond our company. So glad to have you in my community now.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Just to give our attendees something to take away with them, I'm going to go through each of you. So your one thing that you saw was manifesting, the thing that you did to resolve that problem, and what you would do differently to mitigate that problem should you do this again.
So I'll go first. So similar to what we've seen is our team wasn't really using the dashboards, and we noticed this through we had that Slack channel where people could ask us questions, ask any of the analysts questions. And we saw a lot of the same questions that should have been answered with people going to the dashboards or like the self-serve tools. And so what we realized going through that was that the KPIs had shifted, the business needs had shifted and changed, and that we did need to revisit them and align on those KPIs again. And so I think to doing it next time, I think keeping in touch with those stakeholders more regularly and checking in to make sure that what we've created is actually meeting their needs. I think that would be what we would want to do if we were doing it all over again.
I'll go next. So for us, the data culture challenge kind of is we knew that the data culture within different business areas will ultimately be different. Like there is no one tool or solution that will fit perfectly for everyone. The thing is, though, we didn't know necessarily how much it was going to manifest. And ultimately, there was a lot of adaptation that needed to happen. There was a lot of need to better understand the business, partner with different individuals to get that understanding and adopt the tool and the processes and the way we implement and onboard also with all of those areas as well, right? But something to potentially help too with that if you're getting started again, or if we're getting started again, having those processes and structures ultimately, even if it's not one size fit all, does help. Just have the mentality that you will change things for each of the different areas. You might need to set more stringent expectations with one area or increase training for another area. Just be aware of those potential different changes you need to make based on some of the different challenges each area faces.
Thank you. And to summarize, the challenge that we were facing was much like Courtney, was also adoption. And for us, the surprise was how important training was going to be to create the adoption that we were hoping to have at our company. The things that we did to mitigate, we trained. We trained in onboarding, and we trained not only on how to navigate and use Looker, but also how to create your own dashboards in Looker. And we didn't stop there. We didn't just think about onboarding. We also thought about ongoing training and documentation that we would want to have in place. So creating communities, creating Slack channels, having tips and tricks in Confluence, having tips and tricks in starter packs in Looker itself. And if I were to do it all over again, what would I do differently? I think I would have less of a mentality with Looker that if we build it, they will come, and have more of a mentality if we build it and teach everyone how to use it and think out of the box about how we can teach. It doesn't need to be actual classroom style trainings. It can be documentation and videos posted to our intranet. Then they will come.
That's fantastic. I think the common thread is always being open and adjusting to the challenges that will inevitably arise. And I think Laura, you said that mentality. Make sure that mentality is there, and that will help you all succeed. So thank you so much for all taking part today. Some real nuggets of information that people can take away. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see you again.